Hi guys, in this video we are going to see the logging module in Python, but instead of printing the logs or saving the logs into a log file, we are going to save the data into the database, into MySQL database in particular. Let's start by importing the logging module. There are 5 levels of logging depending on the severity. The hierarchy for the logging modes is the following. First we have the logging .debug mode. So this is debug mode. Then we have logging.info. This is info mode. Then we have logging.warning. This is warning mode. We have logging.error. And this is error mode. And last but not least, we have the logging.critical mode. This is critical mode. Now, if we save and run, you will see on the terminal, we only see from the warning level and above. This is because the default logging mode is warning. So everything more severe than warning is going to be displayed on the terminal. Otherwise, it's not going to be displayed. We can change that if we set up the basic config for the logging module, and we can do that by saying logging basic config level equals logging dot debug, right? So now if we save and run again, we will see all the logs on the terminal from the debug mode and above. Can we change this format here? Yes, of course we can. We can do that by adding an extra parameter in the basic config. So let's say comma format, and we specify the format. We need to pass the variables coming from the logging library itself, like ascending time that gives today's date, or like the file name or the function that we have used the logging module, like func name or the message itself. And we can do that. Come on, we can do that and message and like that. Let's save and run, and you will see the format changed here. We have today's date, the function that we call the logging functionality. Here it's module because we haven't called the logging functionality from a specific function, so that's why it's module, and the message we printed here. We can also export these logs into a file instead of printing them on the terminal, and we can do that by specifying the file name, which would be like test log in this case, and file mode equals write. Now if we save and run, you will see we didn't print anything. All the logs went to this test.log file. Storing the logs into files is not a very convenient way to debug the code or find a bug. So it's more preferable in real-life scenarios to save the logs into a database. How can we do that? Let's import the MySQL library here. Import MySQL connector, and also from mysql.connector import error. And now we are going to create a class in order to connect to the database and define our own functions within this class. Let's call it connect_db. Let's define the init function, which would be the connection to the database, and try accept error if we can get a connection to the database, and let's say print cannot connect to the DB, and we can print the error here. We need the F string. So now in order to create a connection to the database, oh, sorry, I forgot the self here. We need to write self.connection. Let's do that, and MySQL, oops, MySQL.connector.connect, and then we have to specify the host, which in this case is localhost, is my local MySQL database. Then the database, which is test, and the user, which is root, and the password, which is root again. Yeah, not very difficult to find. And then we say if self connection underscore is connected. So if there is a connection, then create a cursor. So self dot cursor equals self dot connection dot cursor, and we instantiate an instance of cursor. This is the init function, and then we can define the execute query function, execute underscore query. We provide SQL statement, self and SQL statement, and we just execute the query here using the cursor dot execute and the query. And the last thing we need to do here is define the closing connection function, closing connection, actually close connection, and self, and then we do a self dot connection commit, because we need to commit the data into the database, then self dot cursor close, and self we need to also close the connection dot close. That's it for our database connection class. Okay, and I forgot to specify the E here, except error as E. Remove that line, add space here. Okay. Now it's time to create our custom handler in order to be able to save our logs into the database, because by default the logging function, using the logging function you can print the logs or you can save the logs into a file, but now we want to save the logs into the database. And in order to do that, we need to override the parent class in the logging module. Let's check the parent class in the logging module. We can do that by using the inspect module that would give us the source code of this class. And we can print inspect.getSource and provide the logging parent class, which is handler in this case. And if we save and print, you will see on my terminal, this is the source code of the handler class in the logging library. It has many functions, as you can see here: def, close, flash, set formatter, handle, and init. And here, this is the function we want to override, the init function. As you can see here, it says that this function is implemented by the subclasses. So if we check one of the subclasses of the handler, which is the stream handler, and save and see the functions of this stream handler, you can see it has the rep, dunder method, and the set stream method, and the emit method. So we are going right now, this is the default implementation of the emit function. We are going to override that and write into the database. So let's define a class called custom handler, and we inherit from the parent class, which is in this case is logging dot stream handler. Come on, stream handler. And we need to override the init function because we also need to pass the database connection. Def dot underscore underscore init underscore underscore self and db, and then call the init function of the parent class super dot underscore init underscore underscore, and also here we need self dot db, and that would be our database connection that we pass in a second. But then we have to, as we said, to override the emit function. By default, the emit function has takes a record as a parameter that is coming from other functions that they are calling the handler in the library, and this record contains all the information from our methods that we provided here. Let's say the logging level, the line number that we call this logging module, etc., etc., all the information we need. Now, if we need to check if the record has data, then we need to execute a query db.execute self db, forgot that, execute, if we spell it right, execute query, and pass our insert statement here. Let's use double quotes, and we need to write insert into, we would name our table in the database as logs and values, and now we would pass all the parameters. The first parameter would be, let's say, the file name, and we would get it like that, record.file name. Let's do that as a f string, so we can pass parameters, and then we need to, let's say, the second parameter that we want to store in the database would be record dot function name, the function that we are calling this logging, our logging functionality. And then again we need single dot here and record the line number, the message, of course, that's the most important thing, the message record msg. The last parameter would be the current date. We can provide the current date from the record itself. So let's say if we use, let's do that. If you type record.ascending time, you can use that, but I don't really like that format. I prefer to use the default sysdate of MySQL, but you can use ascending time if you want. We can remove the basic config from here because right now we save the logs into the database using our own format, which is this one, right? And let's move this logging functionality, all the logs here, the debug, info, warning, error, and critical, under a main function. Let's call that, define the main function. Let's use a try and catch block here, because usually, let's say we create our own exception, the zero division exception. Let's do that. Let's divide 1 with 0. That would give a zero division exception, 0 division error plus e, and let's move that, all this code here, except for the logging critical, because usually you use that when there is something critical, an error or everything that could cause an issue into your code, and print E as well using f strings here. Oops, sorry, I have to put the logging functionality before the exception, otherwise we won't see anything from this debug info and warning and error logging. And we can save that. And now we need to create our custom logger. And how we are going to do that, give me a sec. Let's say if we are main, before we call the main function, we need to create our custom logger. We can do that by using the default logging dot logger class, give it whatever name you want, test. Then we need to set the severity level, logger dot set level. That would be logging dot debug. Then we need to create a custom handler, instantiate our custom handler class. So custom handler equals custom handler. We create instantiate the class, and now we have to pass the custom handler to the logger. Add handler, custom handler, and here we go. And now we can call the main function passing the logger we created in the main function. Let's define the logger here, pass the logger, and now instead of using logging, which is the default logging mechanism, we use our own logger. So logger, you copy and paste that here. Instead of logging, we use logger. Instead of writing the logs into files or just printing the logs, now we will save the logs into this logs table into the database. Let's move to the MySQL. We need to create a table, logs, create table logs, and let's create 5 columns. The first one would be file name, varchar, say 200, varchar 200, then the function name that we are calling the logging module. Then we need the function name, what did we do, file number, 200, and we need the methods as well, varchar 200. The last column would be the load time, because we need to keep track when we log, and that would be a date time. Everything would be a varchar except this one, that would be a date column. Okay, let's run the code and create the table. If we select, it should have anything right now, but let's see. Yeah, it's empty. Okay, so back to VS Code. We don't need the inspect module anymore. Let's remove that and let's run the code. Okay, we are missing one argument in the customer handler. Yes, where we create the customer handler, first we need to instantiate the connectDB class. We can do that here and pass the DB connection to the custom handler, otherwise we won't be able to write in the database. Okay, let's run this code again, and oops, we have an error in the SQL statement. Let's go back here and see. Ooh, I'm missing a single quote, one quote, and then a parenthesis at the end. And now we also need to add a finally statement. I forgot about that we need to commit and close the DB connection. So here we need to also pass the DB connection to the main method. And at the end, inside the final statement, we need db.close connection. We need to call the close connection method that we have specified here, close connection. I think, okay, save that and run again. Here we didn't get anything, so we assume that the logs, these logs here, and this one, the logger.critical, so 5 records should have been written in the database. Let's see that. Let's see what we get from the select statement. Yes, and we get 5 records, one for the debug mode, one for the info mode, one for the warning, and one for the error mode, and one for the critical mode, which is under the exception. You can see it says division by 0. So it's working correctly as we expected. Perfect. Let's zoom out and do a quick recap. The first thing we need to do is create a connection to the database. I created a class that connects to the database and 2 other separate methods to execute the query and commit and close the connection. But you don't need to define a class. You can do it with functions only. That's fine. Then we have to create a custom handler that inherits from the stream handler of the logging module, and we need to override the emit function and point to the database where we store our records. In the record object, you will see the file name, func name, the function name, the line number, the method. Down here, we need to instantiate the connection DB class, so we create a connection to the database. Then we have to create our own logger, and we can do that by using logging.logger, and you pass whatever name you want for your logger. And then we have to set the level of the logger. I used debug, but you can use error or info or critical or whatever level you want. If you use logging debug, that means all the logs would be displayed. We instantiate the custom handler class that we created, and we need to pass our custom handler into the logger by using logger.addHandler. And inside the function, you can use this logger using logger.debug or logger.info or warning or error or critical to create logs. Of course, we need to close the connection with the database before we finish and commit our records. And this is how you store data and your logs into the database instead of exporting your logs into files or just printing out logs, which is not very helpful or convenient for that matter. If you like the video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.